A widespread model of the research university unites freedom of intellectual inquiry for both students and professors with the creation of new knowledge through research, the nurturance of a scholarly community, integrating disparate fields, open public communication, and the effort to make knowledge available more widely as a public good. Now, into that sentence are packed a lot of bits of an ideal. And let me just remark on that fact that they are all, I think, part of a kind of model for a university which is understood to be a research university. The phrase research university is an American phrase that implies a distinction between research universities and some other sorts of universities. Elsewhere, it is often the case that the word university is understood to embody this idea of a unity of research with these other functions, but then there are a variety of pressures that are brought to bear on the university system that produce internal distinctions, some of them having to do with how much research support there is, varying with different levels in a hierarchy, and there are a variety of projects, for example, in Germany, at the moment to create a new top tier of world-class universities, which amounts to a kind of distinction of those which are going to have special research support and organization from others. So some version of this is much more widespread than simply the phrase research university might suggest. And I'm going to come back and ask a bit about how well all these things are bundled together. I want to ask to what extent this basic model is challenged by changes that are underway in research universities today. The changes range from transformations of scale to shifts in financing, growing interests in private rather than public goods, new inequalities, and obsessions with rankings. I will particularly urge thinking of free inquiry as a social matter. That is, I'm going to try to suggest that free inquiry is something that is socially organized and exists in that organization, not that it's what you get to do when you don't have anything on your calendar for 2 hours and are able to close the door to your office. This model that I've just tried to summarize in brief terms was remade between the late 18th and early 20th centuries, especially in Europe and America. At the center of the transformation was the integration of education with research, and it's worth just noting that this is something historically brought into being, that it's not just obvious that this should be so. This meant, first of all, an affirmation of the value of new knowledge as distinct from the accumulated and canonized knowledge of the past. New subjects were recognized, not least the sciences and social sciences, and the notion of discovery exerted an increasing influence over the pursuit of knowledge in all fields. This will lead to the point that, for example, literature professors are assessed on the basis of research just as much as chemists, though we might ask whether we mean the same thing by discovery when we talk about new interpretations of the Fairy Queen as when we talk about breakthroughs in chemistry. Even in chemistry, we might ask to what extent we mean new descriptions of the natural world and the making of new dimensions of the physical world in material science, for example. There are a variety of different ways to think about the public good. It's not obvious what the public good is. First off, does the public get to decide on what the public good is? And who is that public? Is it directly open to voting? Would universities last long or be able to have much autonomy if it were? What other sorts of public engagement might inform the public good? Is it a matter of the choice of ministers so that it changes from government to government? Can it be articulated in a way that is relatively stable? How does it show? How well do various kind of functional indicators, like providing what private industry needs, demonstrate the public good? If it's about what private industry needs, to what extent should private industry pay and just purchase what it needs rather than have it mediated through a larger collective institution? Now, I think all these things are familiar enough to everybody in the room that I don't have to lay them out. What I want to stress about it is, first off, going back to what I said about money changing hands when business students take sociology courses, universities are in large part creatures of cross-subsidies. One of the reasons we are inarticulate is that we struggle to articulate collectively the value of research and the value of the teaching we do in a way that works for the whole university and allows us to use the interest the public has in certain currently fashionable fields to keep the whole enterprise afloat, right? But the risk is that we are drawn so much to the fields that have current support that we starve the other fields. And part of the issue is that research has come to mean a winner-take-all competition in a hierarchical structure for the top level. This is contrary to a variety of notions, including the idea of knowledge as a public good, that is, as something essentially shared, as non-rivalrous, so that it's not reduced by being circulated. It's been conceived of much more as an essential monopoly. It's contrary to the idea of scientific work as being inherently based on a sharing of knowledge among scientists. And there are more and more reports of the problems with this. I mention only one bit of research on the relationship between university-based scientists. These happen to be, so this is good for Bridget, they are basically biochemists for the most part, and people in chemical engineering, between university-based scientists and scientists in corporate science, which found that the scientists in corporate settings were happier. And a primary reason for their reported happiness is that they found much more intellectual sharing with their colleagues in the corporate research labs. They felt that if they went down the corridor in the university and asked to borrow a piece of equipment or asked for help with a particular operation, they were rebuffed by scientists who behaved proprietarily because they felt the assessment system in the university was overwhelmingly based on an individual private property model, whereas when working for the corporate private industry sector, they felt that everybody believed they were in a common enterprise, and it was good for the company to succeed. They often would all benefit from that, and they shared. Now, this should be a kind of warning here. It's not a matter of is the corporation good or the corporation bad. It is a matter of how the enterprise is organized. And you can organize a private for-profit lab in a better or worse way, and you can organize university work in a better or worse way